Welcome to the Caregiver Coalition webinar, Lunch and Learn workshop. My name is Matthew Barcasio. I am with the Outreach and Education with the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency, Aging and Independent Services. I'll be your host on behalf of the Caregiver Coalition of San Diego, an organization made up of many different community partners dedicated to helping caregivers. I will be recording today's webinar for future viewing. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we are pleased to have Debbie Emery Flores and Tammy Tui Kolovatu, who will speak about one person's experience on caregiving, a different perspective on stress. Debbie has worked in the San Diego Community College District since 2013, running the Emeritus Program for older adults since 2016. She has a Master's of Science in Rehabilitation Counseling from SDSU and a Bachelor of Arts in Gerontology. She also teaches a brain health class. Tammy Tui Kolovatu worked as a teacher, bookkeeper, and at a memory care facility before becoming her mother's caregiver for 10 years. Due to her experience, she has a deep understanding about caring for those with advanced dementia, its effects on an individual, and their family. There will be 10 minutes available for a question and answer at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please click on the message button to type in your questions in the chat box. Also, please click on the mute button, those of us who are in attendance here today, to assure the presentation goes smoothly without any background noise. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Debbie and Tammy.
Thank you, Matthew. It really is my pleasure and Tammy's to be here today. It is great to have been invited. I was invited by one of your members, Dorothy Howard, who is actually a student in one of my brain fitness classes. So it's good to be with you today. Because you are caregivers, I already know that all of you are very special people and wonderful people, because it takes a lot to do that. We all know that as we care for other people, it's critical to care for ourselves too. You know, when we go on an airplane and we hear them say, you know, if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first, and then you can take care of somebody else. Well, that's kind of the way it is with caregiving. We do need to take care of ourselves so that we can be healthy and available to care for other people that we love. Caregivers have so many challenges: physical health, mental health, emotional, social. You know, caregiving impacts all of those areas of our lives. And many times the last thing you want to do, or that you feel you can do, is try to take care of yourself, because you're just too wrapped up in taking care of others. And sometimes you're reluctant to ask others to do that too. Well, I looked through the Caregiver Coalition guidebook, and it has some wonderful advice and tips on how to take care of yourself so that you're well enough to take care of others. Things like being part of a support group, making time for yourself regularly, being with friends, managing stress, eating right, exercising, and all of those things. And those are all excellent pieces of advice, and they really are important and vital to us. And I really encourage you as caregivers to try to implement as many of those as you possibly can, because they really are good pieces of sound advice. As a brain fitness instructor, I teach my students how detrimental chronic stress can be to your brain. It does terrible things to the brain. Chronic stress, which is what most caregivers experience, is something that can damage your brain over the long term. You're releasing chemicals like cortisol on a regular basis, and it damages connections and it damages brain cells. You find yourself not being able to make good decisions or even simple decisions. You find yourself forgetting words or being irritable or having memory issues. And these all have to do with how your physical brain is functioning under chronic stress. So I teach my students that chronic stress affects not just the physical body, but the physical brain also. And it affects us emotionally and mentally and socially as well. So because you probably hear about all the techniques that are talked about in your handbook that I mentioned earlier, what I wanted to do today was something just a little bit different and talk to Tammy someone that I know who has lived experience, as Matthew said, being a full-time caregiver for a lot of years. And we're going to hear her perspective on stress and some of the things that she did to keep herself going, her life going, and her family's life going as she cared for her mother with dementia. So I am really privileged to introduce Tammy. Now I know Matthew already did, but Tammy has cared for her mother for 10 years until she recently passed, and I truly appreciate her being here under those circumstances. Her mother had frontotemporal dementia, and so she really has, like Matthew said, a deep understanding of what it takes to care for someone with advanced dementia and all the implications, how it affects that person and their family. Tammy's a friend of mine, and I love her, and she's been a great example to me, and I've always admired her for all these years for the sacrifice and service that she's given to her mother and her family. And she really does bring a different perspective on stress. And so I'm hoping that you can gain something from some of the things she says today to help you as a caregiver, a different perspective on stress. So welcome, Tammy.
Thank you.
Let me just start out by asking you something to set a background. Your mother was Japanese.
Mhm.
Can you explain maybe how your culture played a part in your decision to quit work and care for her full time?
Well, I think ever since I was young, I've always had immediate family living with us and extended family. And I knew that my mom has always had her relatives live with her in Japan. And one of the things that my mom's generation has done is in Japan is most of them were raised to take care of their elderly parents and their uncles and their aunts, those that were aging. And so when it was time for us, my grandmother, who was in Japan at the time, was getting older and needing assistance. We had her come to America and to come and live with us. So ever since I was young, I've had my grandmother live with us, and I watched my mom take care of her, and then my uncles or aunts or anybody else that may have needed assistance. And I just felt like it was just part of life, and that's just what we did as a family. And I watched her, growing up, care for my grandmother, and she used to always say, "Now, when I get old, you're going to take care of me, right?" And of course, I would say, "Of course, Mom, that's what we do." But as I got older and, had my own family, I was thinking, wow, this is going to be kind of tough. But I felt like it was my responsibility. And when it did come time for me to provide care for my mother, it was just something that I chose to do. It was a choice I made. I'm thankful that, I was in a position where I could do so. Although I was working and we had a second income, I did quit my job so that I could tend to my mom and fulfill that responsibility. And I think because I look at it as a choice, and just a responsibility and a period of time in my life where I felt it was necessary, I was blessed to be able to do so.
Tammy, you mentioned that as responsibility, and I know you mentioned that to me before, that your role as a caregiver you felt was your choice and your responsibility. So I wanted to ask you how that maybe reframed your experience instead of being just something you had to do or a great stressful experience of your life. Did it reframe it for you as just part of your life? Did it help you in any way?
Absolutely. I think I have siblings. There's three other. I have a sister and two brothers, and we were all raised the same. But I think that I felt that that's something I wanted to do for my mom and dad. My brothers, also want to help, but they helped in other ways. They did what they could do financially or in any way necessary to help me take care of my parents. My sister, stepped up to the plate and would take her 2 days a week so that my dad could still spend time with my mom. And so we kind of worked as a team, but I spent most of the time having her in my home 24/7 and tending to her needs. I'm thankful that I also had a husband that grew up the way I did, with extended family in his home and the understanding of caring for, our aging parents. And so he was on board, and we were able to just incorporate that as part of our life.
I'm sure that was a huge blessing to have that common understanding and culture. You mentioned to me earlier that you willingly took on the role of caregiver and that you allowed other family members to keep their roles as family members in the family, but you took on the role of caregiver. Can you explain that a little?
So, this is all trial and error, but over the time that I had my mom, at first, I thought, well, everybody can pitch in and help. But then I found that it was a little difficult because her behaviors were different with each one of my siblings or with my children or my husband. And so I had to rethink, how am I going to do this? And I decided to be the caregiver, the person that was going to make sure she was safe, had what she needed, did her daily tasks. And I wanted my dad to be her husband. I wanted my sister to be her daughter, and my sons to be her, children. And I had to compartmentalize my feelings in some ways, because as a caregiver, sometimes I had to address my mom in a manner that I probably wouldn't have if she was my mother, but because for her protection and safety, I had to use a different tone of voice or had to redirect, her behavior in a different way. And so I had to be the caregiver, but I wanted my children to be her grandchildren. And I wanted, so I didn't want them to have to say no or tell her, you can't do this. They would always say, let's go ask Tammy, let's go ask mom, and or my dad to not be able to be her husband and take things away. So it was me that got to do that. And I found that doing that helped me to relieve the stress in our household, and things eventually got smoother that way.
So you took all the behavior, but you mentioned that it helped relieve stress because your family members didn't have to be stressed out.
Right.
Of that.
And they would say, yes, grandma, or look at that. And then we'll go check with mom. And then I would come in and say, no, or do what I needed to do if it was something that she couldn't have, or was not safe, or.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With your mom's progressive frontotemporal dementia, what types of strategies did you use, Tammy, to handle her behavioral changes, and how did those strategies help you so you wouldn't get stressed out?
So at first I just thought, well, we'll just kind of go with the flow, but I found that being a teacher, for 15 years, I always had a lesson plan. And every day when I went to the classroom, you have your lesson plan and you know what you want to teach the children. But based on their behavior and how the day's going to go, you may or may not get through your lesson plan that day. So you have to make adjustments. And I found that although I wake up in the morning and know what we need to do for the day for my mom, there's going to be some things that may not go as smoothly as I want. So having that attitude of willingness to make adjustments, preparing, setting the things aside before she goes in the shower, so I'm not running to go get, the hairbrush, or running to go get, so that she can continue to do the tasks that she needs, but everything's set up for her so that I'm not worried that she's going to be a fall risk while I step outside for a few minutes while she's in the bathroom, or everything is set up. And then as, we get in the shower in the bathroom, she can do those things and I don't have to leave. And it helped me to relieve my stress. And my expectations had to change a little bit too. I knew in the afternoons with the sundowning and that her behavior changed, and it was harder for her to go places in the afternoon. So I tried to schedule all of her doctor's appointments in the morning. I tried to, even though she was mobile and could walk, when I took her out in public, I put her in a wheelchair so that I can prevent her from being a fall risk. And when we, and as, her behavior changed, I also had to make modifications. We no longer could do certain things. We had to just go for a drive in the car instead of get out in public, or just because of the disease, taking place. And my mom's frontal temporal disorder, dementia, was a behavioral variant. So her personality changed drastically, from the quiet, very refined, proper mother that she always was, to language I've never heard come out of her mouth, behaviors that I've never expected her to have, and so I had to protect her dignity as well in a lot of ways by not taking her to places that, would cause a scene. So that would just relieve the stress that I have.
So starting with a plan, but being flexible enough within that plan to make improvements. Great advice. You mentioned to me earlier, one of the things that getting respite relief, even from family members, tended to create even more stress for you. Can you tell us why that was?
Well, so we know, we know all the things we're supposed to do. Debbie mentioned it in the beginning, to find time for yourself, to have other people relieve you of your, so that you can get away and you can have me time, so that, you can do those things to help you. But I found it was just so stressful. I mean, I had to, if I did have a volunteer come in, they're strangers to my mom. They don't know who she is. So that in itself set her off. And then, anticipating that 20 minutes from the time I was out, I was going to get a call, because they're volunteers. They just want to help or support. But if my mother's behavior becomes, bad or complicated, I get the call. And so although I try and prepare ahead of time, set everything up, sometimes it's just not, it wasn't worth it. I got to a point where it just wasn't worth it. Even using my own immediate family, having my aunts or cousins or somebody come sit with her, and I would have everything ready. She would know that I was gone because they're here, visiting her. And so her behavior would change, and it's something they couldn't handle. And so I would have to come home. And so ideally, support is great, but didn't always work. I did find times when I could, sleep. I took naps when she took naps, because I knew she was in a safe environment and she was sleeping, so I was sleeping. Because there was nights when she would tap on the wall all night long and send Morse code or whatever, and keep me up. So in order for me to get the rest I need the next day, there was a window of time that I had to keep her, during her nap. When she napped, I napped, and everybody knew 12:30 to 2:30 was our quiet house time, and I would take calls after or do things after. And then routine and schedule was very, very important as well.
I bet there are a lot of other people that have the similar experiences when it comes to getting respite. So thanks for sharing that. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of good advice, both in the Caregiver Coalition guidebook and, everywhere, available for caregivers. So Tammy, I wanted to ask you, for you, what was the reality of implementing any of those suggestions? I'm sure you're aware of those. Did they work for you, any of them? And why or why not?
So I think they did. Honestly, my sister, who took my mom 2 days a week to give me a little bit of a break, she was very good about, finding me time and knowing where her boundaries were and doing what she needed to do for herself first. And I think it benefited her tremendously. She had support groups that she participated in. She would tell me, this is not a good week. I'm not taking mom because I can't handle her. And so, that would be a week that maybe I didn't get relief, but she knew where her boundaries were and she did that, and it worked for her. And that's great. She knew that I try to eat well or try and get my sleep, but sometimes it didn't work. And those are great suggestions and ideas. And for some people it will. I think I I don't know. I just,
Well, I think, from what you've told me, you were the go-to in your family. You were the first line of defense. You were the one that everybody counted on to take care of your mom. So you didn't have the luxury of doing all of those things. But you had certainly some strategies.
oh,
that helped
definitely.
you. Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, I would like to ask you, what would you say was the key to you being able to handle the responsibilities of being a caregiver for so many years?
Mhm.
Would you say there was one thing that was the key, or what few things?
I think, attitude, an attitude adjustment, I wake up in the mornings and then expectations too of how your day's gonna go. Just keep it simple. Know that sometimes you're gonna have to make adjustments. You can't predict behavior of people that you're caring for. Some days they're gonna have great days, other days they're not gonna cooperate, and keeping your expectations realistic, I think really helps. Having the preparation, and then when you do have a good day, it's great, and you feel like you've accomplished something. And I think I know too that I always in the back of my mind know that that was a choice, it was a responsibility, and it's just a short period of time in my life that I can, return those I guess, return the kindness and things that my parents have given me. I mean, I was raised by very wonderful parents, and I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to help them. And anyway,
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. You said so many things. Accepting the responsibility, knowing that that was a choice, having that attitude, having the plan, but being flexible. Those are all things that helped you to accept, what you needed to go through to help your mom. Final question, Tammy. Do you have any final advice from your own experience to give to caregivers who are dealing with this huge responsibility and the stress that comes with it?
I think just know that it's temporary. I mean, it's not going to last forever. The period of time that you're caring for your loved one could be just a few months. It may be a couple years, but it's just a short period of time in our lives, and no judgment. Everybody is doing the best they can. I did what I thought was best. I think that there are many things I could have done a little better, but overall, I just did the best I could with what was available to me. I know that there's a lot of resources out there, and for like my sister, it was great. Those resources really helped her and got her to be able to be a support to me as I needed it, and I'm just grateful. I just have a whole different appreciation for anybody that takes the time to care for their loved ones or relatives, because it's something we can do, and I know that for me it was a choice that I made, and just it did, it may have lasted longer than I expected, but I'm grateful for the time that I had to do it.
I think that's wonderful, Tammy, that you approached it with gratitude because you realized that, your mother had done so much for you when you were young, and you just had a wonderful attitude about it. It didn't make it easier necessarily, but it kept you going every day. So I really appreciate that. Tammy, thank you for being willing to share your thoughts and some experiences with us in this short time. I hope that some of Tammy's experiences and insights will help you as caregivers maybe to realize, don't feel guilty, approach it with no judgment, just, do the best you can. And that not always does all of the sage advice work for everyone, that we're all unique and individual. We have individual situations. So that as a caregiver, feel like you can come up with your own strategies. Maybe they don't fit in with what's already given, but come up with unique strategies that does work for you and your family and the loved one you're caring for. And just do the best you can with those strategies. There really is a personal cost to caregiving. There really is. And I recommend that you just do the best you can and not feel guilty. And I commend you, each of you, for being a caregiver and for sacrificing your love and your time and your self to help that person out who's in need. So Matthew, we'll go ahead and turn the time back over to you. Thank you again, Tammy.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Tammy, for the amazing interview, and especially for Tammy for sharing her story. We thank you all for listening in today and joining the Caregiver Coalition webinar, Lunch and Learn Workshop. For more great workshops like this, you can visit the Caregiver Coalition website at caregivercoalitionsandiego.org. So we, again, can't thank you enough, and our deepest gratitude to Debbie Emery Flores and Tammy Tuokolavatu for today's webinar. So we hope to see you again, and thank you.